The trouble is, of course, that for any country, but particularly Bhutan, there is actually, thank you, a trade-off between well-being and wealth. Some policies which promote happiness actually keep people poorer for longer. Thanks very much. Do you accept that the pursuit of happiness will mean a sacrifice in economic growth?
No, it simply means moderation, tempering material growth with spirituality. And in this respect, I can very honestly tell you that Bhutan could have been materially, economically, a far more prosperous country than it is now, had we forgotten and neglected this spiritual aspect.
The Bhutanese capital of Thimphu is remarkable for its lack of advertising. The city council recently ordered that shopkeepers take down hoardings promoting Coke and Pepsi.
I'm not so sure whether our children need to consume Pepsi. We have such fresh water here, both bottled as well as free-flowing. And why is it that we, as parents, are allowing our children and even ourselves to be beguiled, to be deluded by the belief, by the forces of these hoardings and what comes on television? You know, the superstars, you know, drinking Coca-Cola and say, this is the best way to quench your thirst. Why are we doing this?
It's possible in a remote kingdom in the Himalayas where they've got an absolute monarchy. But what about the rest of the world? Could we do it in Britain?
We should ban advertising to children below a certain age, age of 10 to 12 or so. We already regulate alcohol to children. We should also regulate, and I think ban below a certain age, advertising of junk food through to children. There is no case in terms of health or well-being of children for advertising like this, and all the evidence is that it can do the reverse.
Should we ban advertising to children?
No, definitely not. I don't believe in banning things. What we should be doing is educating children. No, not educating children, educating parents that their children might have a chance of a better adjusted, a more happy and content life if they consumed different things in a different way.
Lord Richard Layard is an economist and an evangelist for the science of happiness. Behind the scenes, he's been pressing government to crack down on advertising.
I don't see that we need, for example, allow pictorial advertising which makes people feel they need things if they want to be a certain type of person and conveys very little information.
Why? Because it's actually, you think it has a negative impact on the nation's happiness?
Yes, because it makes people feel poorer.
It's the problem of comparison again. It seems that if we want a happier society, we should reduce the gap between rich and poor. And so, some close to government are now arguing that, believe it or not, taxes make us happy.
We tend to think of taxes as bad, period. I know it's difficult for us to believe when we take out our checkbook at the end of the year, but it looks like, at least at a certain level, taxes are likely to increase the well-being of the population.
We should try and discourage people from comparing themselves with other people, and I think the tax system can help us in that way.
Isn't it a tax on envy, effectively? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, no, it's justified by what we know about human nature.
It's a new justification for taxes. Not countering poverty or funding public services. Rich people make poorer people feel bad. So the heavy hand of the state should be brought to bear.
If you just told me, well, you're being taxed because the fact that you're well off makes somebody else unhappy, people might be rather more reluctant about that. There are tough choices as to actually how many people at the top end of the spectrum governments could think they could get away with taxing more heavily, simply because the fact that those people are well off annoys other people.
When we look at the data, it appears that there's a sense in which everyone is working too hard. We all worry too much about how we compare in our income and our possessions to our next door neighbour.
We are stuck on a treadmill. In our search for happiness, we work longer, commute further, to get richer, to buy more. And yet the science of happiness suggests we should do exactly the opposite.
If only we could learn as a society to slow down, we might all be able to become happier if we could all take more leisure together.
Okay, here's a philosophical poser for you. The Americans and the Germans both earn pretty much the same per hour and are equally productive when they're at work. But the Germans take a lot more holiday than the Americans. The question is, who's richer?
People who work more and more hours, and men in the U.S. work over 40 hours a week, are less happy. People who have more vacation and work somewhat shorter hours are happier.
I've suggested that we should try to abolish Wednesdays, say. If we all took more leisure simultaneously, we could stop worrying about our rivals at work getting the promotion ahead of us, and in that way we could all learn to be happier and more relaxed at the same point.
Abolishing Wednesdays may not be a very practical policy idea, but doesn't the science of happiness suggest government should encourage us all to chill out a bit more?
In the mornings, I'm normally feeling a bit hassled by the time I leave the house. Sometimes there's an emotional goodbye to my son, who's 2. Bye, sweetie pie. Good day. Bye. Bye.
Ursula Anderson is a classic 21st century woman, juggling being a mother with a high-powered job in the city.
It's usually fairly crowded. By the time we get to Earl's Court, it's sardines, jam-packed in. I often think to myself that they wouldn't treat animals this way, but we subject ourselves to it every morning.
She admits it's a lifestyle that can leave her too stressed to be happy. So, in her lunch hour, Ursula agreed to take part in an experiment at the City Guildhall Art Gallery to see whether there are happy benefits in slowing down.
Now we're going to look at the relationship between the cortisol, which is the stress hormone that we all have and produce in the saliva.
Along with other city workers, Ursula answered questions about her lifestyle and provided a saliva sample for analysis. The scientists wanted to measure levels of the stress hormone cortisol to see if a visit to the art gallery would lower them. So, while Ursula takes a leisurely dose of culture, the scientists are busy analysing their samples.
The square here shows you the average amount of cortisol in the saliva samples of our Guildhall population, our 25, 35 people as they came in. You can see it is 50% higher than it should be for the time of day.
So, will the art gallery make any difference?
In the 30 minutes that they were there, they tracked down dramatically. That fall was much steeper than the normal fall over the day. However, of particular interest, I know, was Ursula. And she came in with an astonishing 12 units of cortisol at this particular time of day, much higher than the rest of these stressed population of city workers. But she did, even within this short time, manage to track right down to normal values by the end of her visit to the art gallery.
I was quite shocked that it was so high. The study's obviously shown that going to an art gallery or anywhere that's a relaxing environment, like a park, is a good idea. So I will try to take a break and get out of the office to try and reduce my stress levels.
I think a lesson for us all really is that we should take ourselves away from the causes of stress. So chilling out, taking time off for short periods of time can have a real positive impact.
The science of happiness, though, suggests some of us should take a longer journey. If we want to be fulfilled, we should consider packing up that stressful, tedious job and doing something we really like, even if it means a big pay cut.
The remuneration here is less than I would have got in industry, and when I came here I took a pay cut of about half. The benefits of it outweigh the financial gains I had before.
Martin Turner was an engineer who spent his spare time messing about with trains, and then one day he decided it was time to change.
My job here makes me feel as though I'm making a contribution to something worthwhile, rather than just actually manufacturing widgets, nuts and bolts, drilling holes in washers as a means of actually earning a living.
The science of happiness suggests what's going on. Martin has put meaning before money, what the positive psychologists describe as serving something you think is bigger than you are.
The overriding satisfaction I get out of the job here is that I feel as I'm doing something worthwhile, doing something that I'm good at. I feel as I'm capable of doing a good job here, and that's always sort of been one of my motivations, is to do the best I can.
Do you have to change your life? Well, according to the happiness experts, there are techniques that can turn even the dullest job into a fulfilling one.
One of the best ones I know is first to identify what your signature strengths are.
What are you good at?
Well, no, not quite. We want to distinguish between talents and strengths. So talents is what they told you in school you were or were not good at. Those are all means to an end. But there are a set of other things, 24 of them actually, which are your strengths, which are ends in themselves, like kindness and fairness and social intelligence. Those aren't means to an end. Those are ends in themselves.
A simple questionnaire will reveal your own signature strengths, information which Professor Seligman argues can help you make a dreary job a source of happiness.
One woman I worked with was a bagger at the grocery store, so she put things into bags all day long, and she really hated the job. An assembly line kind of job, and she took the signature strength test, and her highest strength was social intelligence. So her assignment was to recraft bagging to use social intelligence.
The supermarket packer still had to pack, but her job description was changed. Now she also had to make her conversation with the customers a highlight of the day for at least 3 of them.
Notice what she did. She put her highest strength on offer all day long and transformed the job from being heavy and tedious to being one in which she was absorbed in the job.
We asked pollsters NOP to conduct a happiness survey for this series. 1,000 people were telephoned to find out whether work fulfillment was one of the 2 major sources of happiness in their lives. Only 77 people said yes. The science of happiness urges us to challenge the assumptions which underpin our society. It is a frightening, but some would say exhilarating prospect.
It's an absolutely crucial opportunity because the assumption that economic growth delivers happiness is suspect. The assumption that consumer goods can fulfill all these tasks for us. Social, psychological tasks, a sense of the meaning of my life through material possessions is deeply suspect. And if we want to make progress in human terms, if we want to approach happiness in any degree, then it is these assumptions that we have to re-examine.
It is starting to happen. Politicians are realizing that making people happy is as important as making people rich. The next task, though, is working out how to convince us all to change the way we live. Next week, we've always been told laughter is the best medicine. Well, now science suggests happiness may be a better route to good health than dieting or exercise. Government is being urged to recruit an army of therapists to make people happier. For more on happiness, go to bbc.co.uk/happiness formula.